Hi guys. So have you got any question with respect to HTTP status code? You might be getting in your interviews, right? While answering questions from REST APIs, like if I am passing post call or get call or put call or any other type of mappings call. So in that scenario, you will be returning something to the end client, right? So after processing the request which is sent by the client, they want to get the response in the form of JSON or XML, right? So there should be a response that needs to be returned back, but it should have a status code along with it attached. Okay, so if that response doesn't contain status code, then the client will not understand that whether that response is correct or not. Okay, sometimes it will give you URL not found, sometimes it will give internal server error, sometimes they will give you the JSON response. So client will not understand like what is this I'm getting, what's the importance of this response. So if there is a status code attached with the JSON response, like 200 okay, 201 created, this kind of response, if it is coming in the response, then client will understand like, yes, I'm getting proper response and output. That means whatever URL I was sending, I was hitting in the backend to get the response I want, it is correct. So that actually creates the authenticity of the request call from the client side. So I will be explaining you now like what all kind of status codes are present, HTTP status codes that may come. Okay, so there can be multiple type of information that the status code gives you. Okay, one is informational kind, one is success or failure kind. Okay, another is 400x series, like 1xx, 2xx, 3xx, 4xx, 5xx. These are five types of status code basically happens. Okay, so mainly you will be asked about 400, 4xx and 5xx type of status codes. So that you should be very much well versed with. So let me share my screen and explain you what all type of status codes available. I hope you can see my screen now. So these are basic five types of status codes available. Okay, so 1xx means it will give you the information with respect to the request the client is providing at the backend side. Okay, so based upon that, it will give the information like whether that request is stuck at some place or what the server is actually responding. Okay, so based upon that, it gives information. So this is informational based status code. Then comes 2xx status code. The 2xx is based upon success status code. Okay, so 200 is there, 201 is there. Okay, one is okay, one is created, means one entity data has been saved in the database successfully. So that is the response you will get. That means status has been created. Okay, so one resource has been created and it's saved in the DB. So that actually the response code that is being generated and given to the client back. Then comes redirection. So there is a chance of URL redirection to another URL. Okay, so that there is a chance like one microservice calling another microservice, or one URL request is there and it is passing on back to the another URL. So there is a chance of URL redirection. So that is a status code that has been returned back. Then comes 4xx type, which is client error. So let's suppose the client is trying to request the particular URL which doesn't exist. So let's suppose some URL is there. Okay, 8081 port slash, it is giving me student slash ID, the URL, the client side is passing like 105. Okay, or some other type of URL. Okay, some other type of URL which is not present in the controller layer, and the client wants to know the response of that. Then in that scenario, client error will come. Okay, because the URL which you are typing is not mapped with the controller methods or the mapping methods. So in that scenario, client error will come like URL not found. Okay, it is one of the example. Then server error will come when the issue is at the server side, means at a backend side, means some issue is there at the server and that we need to resolve it. Okay, some code related issue or database related issues. So in that scenario, 5xx type of server codes will come. So the best example is 500 internal server error. That means some issue with respect to code or some issue with respect to database saving or updation or any DML operation. Okay, so these are the famous five status codes. So let's dive deep, and one by one we will be understanding like what all types are available and what does that actually mean. So let's dive into it. Like, what is 1xx? So it's basically communicates that whatever the protocol level information that has been transferred, it will give you the data with respect to that. So first, if I'm considering 100, so 100 status code is there. Okay, so 100 status code means it's an interim response. It indicates to the client that initial part of the request has been received, but it is not rejected by the server yet. It is in the process. Okay, it is not rejected. The client should continue this by sending the remainder of the request. That means some part of the request has been sent and some part has not been sent. Okay, so if one part is sent, then it will request to the client to send another part as well. Okay, so if the request has been completed, then we can ignore it. So this server must send a final response after the request has been completed. Okay, so if the entire set of requests has been sent, then the client will expect a response based upon the request. Then switching protocol is there 101. It is sent in response to the upgrade which the request header is having, right? From the client side, header will be updated. So in that request header, the changes has been requested from the client side. Then the data has been sent back as a response to an upgrade request basically. And it indicates the protocol server to protocol, and it indicates the protocol, which protocol the particular server is switching to. Okay, then 102 is processing. So this 1xx code you will not get to see much, but you should be knowing from a bird's eye point of view, like what all things actually mean, so that if the interviewer asks you, then you should be able to answer that. Okay, they will not go much in depth into it. So 102 is processing web dev. So it indicates that server has received the request and it is under process. Okay, but currently there is no response available yet. So there might be server down, or it has been stuck by one thread. One thread has acquired that resource and it is being stuck over there, or there is no response for that request. There might be any scenarios, right? In that scenario, 102 processing will come, like it is still under process. Then 103 is the early hints. Okay, so it is basically linked with the link headers. It suggests to the user agent that start preloading the resource while the server prepares a final response. So it will tell the user agent to preload the resources basically. Okay, so these are basically 1xx, which basically it represents the communication with respect to protocol transfer. Okay, so going back, next is status code 200. Okay, so 2xx. So it indicates that client's request was accepted successfully and it will give the response back. Okay, so after getting the request, it will give the response back as well, right? So it accepts the data successfully. That represents 2xx. So 200 okay is the famous example, like it indicates that the request has been succeeded. Whatever request you are trying to give to the backend, it is being processed and it is returning you back the status code with the response. Okay, then 201 created. It indicates that request has succeeded and a new resource has been created as a result. So maybe there is a request to update data. There might be a request to create the resource, a new resource, and save it into database. Okay, so in that scenario, in basically in the case of post mapping, 201 created will be used. So these all 2xx will be linked with a post mapping basically. Okay, and with respect to get mapping as well. So all the form of mapping is there. If there is any updation or if there is any fetch operation, we need to know the status, right? So 200 okay will be for all. 201 created is basically for post mapping, and when we have to save the data or update the data or delete the data. So in that scenario, 201 created will be used. Okay, then 202 accepted. It indicates that the request has been received, but it is not completed yet. It has just been received. It has been accepted, but it is not completed yet. Okay, so it is like a long running request, might be some threads is being attached to it. Multiple threads are working simultaneously, so it's under process. So request has been accepted, but it's not completed. Then 203, non-authoritative information. It indicates that the returned meta information in the entity header is not the definitive set. Okay, so it is basically gathered as a local third party copy. Okay, so this not of much use basically. So it is for your knowledge purpose. You should be knowing this. Okay, but in-depth knowledge is not required on this. Okay, so it is basically linked with the entity header. Okay, so it should not be, it is not used much in the real world projects. So 204 no content, this it means the server has fulfilled the request, but it does not need to return a response body. Okay, because data is not present. Okay, so it may return the updated meta information, but it will not return any request body back. Okay, because it doesn't return any response. So then 205 is reset content. It indicates to the client, okay, it indicates the client to reset the document, okay, which was sent, who has sent this request. Okay, we need to reset that particular document which was sent from the request side. That is reset content. Whatever client is requesting, we need to reset that particular document. Maybe there's a chance that the client is sending you document like in the form of file, okay, or any other form of document, then they want to reset that. Then partial content, okay, it is used when the range header is sent from the client, okay, to request only a part of a resource. Then that means a partial content is stated. It is not focusing upon complete resource, but only a particular part of it. That means it's a partial content. Okay, it is basically it will go in the header side. So that's why it is used when the range header is sent from the client to request only a particular part of resource, not full. Okay. Then comes 300, 3xx. So it indicates that the client must take some additional action in order to complete the request. Okay. So client need to do some other set of actions as well, not only sending request or processing or requesting the data to process. So along with that, it requires some additional data, additional action as well from the client side to perform that request. So there are multiple type of status code. So 300 means multiple choice. That means request has more than one possible resources. One particular resource may have more than one possible resources available. Okay, the user agent should choose one of them. Then move 301, move permanently. The URL of the requested resource has been changed permanently. So that this represents 301 move permanently whenever the client is requesting this endpoint, and then they are getting this response status code like 301. That means the URL is not present as of now. It has been moved to entirely different resource permanently. Okay. So new URL, you have to take it, okay, from the location header, and then you have to fill it back to get the response. Okay. Then 302 found. The URL of the requested resource has been changed temporarily. Okay, the new URL is given by the location field in the response. Okay, so this is the thing. So it's like it's found and then it's moved permanently. Then 303 see other. The response can be found under a different URI. So that means the URI which you are sending it back, that particular URI doesn't contain the data or the response, but it should be there. It should be retrieved using the get resource. Whenever you are trying to do the get call, you will get a URL first, and then you have to make use of that URL to send the response to get the data. So that is basically a user might need to, client might need to perform some other type of action as well along with the getting the response from the URL which is being hit, because the URL is not present as of now. It is present at some other resource, at some other location header. So we need to fetch the URL first, and then using that particular URL, we need to fetch the data based upon the current request which the client wants to get. Okay. Then 304 not modified. It indicates that a client that the response has not been modified. It indicates the client that the response has not been modified yet. Okay. So the client can continue to use the same cache version of the response. Okay, so whatever response has been coming, it is same, it has not been changed, and you can continue using the same response. That is 304 not modified. So it is a basic 4-5. There are a lot of status codes basically for each 1xx, 2xx, but these are the main ones. You should be going through it. Okay. Then these are for 4xx client error. Client means client is making some error in the sending the request. Okay, from backend side it's fine, but the client is making some issue while sending the request. So this category of error status code points that client is making some issue. 400 bad request is famous. That means the request server didn't understood because the URL has not been mapped in any properties file or any configuration file. This URL is not present. So client is want to get the response based upon the URL which doesn't exist. So server is not able to understand. That means server is giving you 400 bad request. Okay. So it indicates to the client, so do not repeat sending the same request again and again for the URL which doesn't exist. So modify the URL. So that actually client tells that actually it notifies to the client. Then unauthorized 401 unauthorized. It indicates a request requires user authentication information. Okay, it is you are not authorized. So you will get it in the case of Spring Security. Okay, when you will install Spring Security, okay, in your dependency file, and then when you will try to get the request, whenever the client will try to request the data, they will get 401 unauthorized. Okay, so you have to give authorization, you have to implement the configuration for Spring Security in your code, and then you have to give the permission like admin permission, user permission, what role the user is having. Based upon the role, they will get the access. If the admin role is not given to a particular functionality to the user person, so they will not be authorized to see the response of the request. So that is 401 unauthorized. Then 402 payment required. So it is reserved for future use, so it is not basically used as of now. It is experimental purpose, so you can skip it. 403 is forbidden. So basically it is unauthorized request. The request you are trying to fetch it, the request for which you are trying to get the response is unauthorized. Okay, the client is not having rights. Client does not have any rights to get the response for the request that they are trying to fire. Okay, so client might not be having access to all the request endpoints, so they need to get the access first. Okay, and after getting the access they can get the response back. So that is 403 forbidden. So now you get the difference between 401 unauthorized and 403 forbidden, right? 401 unauthorized means the particular user is authenticated, but it is user authentication is required. Like what role the particular user is having, like user role is there, then admin role is there. What particular role the user is having, the particular client is having. Based upon that only they will get a response. Okay, and 403 forbidden is it is not authorized to all the clients. Okay, so that's the difference between unauthorized and forbidden. Then 404 not found. That means requested resources not available. URL is not found. Okay. Then next comes method not allowed. So that means let's suppose you are trying to fetch the data, but you are giving post call. Okay, or you are trying to get the you are trying to save the data into the database, but you are making use of get call. So in that scenario, HTTP method should match. Or else in the above method in the controller layer, you have put get mapping, but from postman, you are trying to call that endpoint with post mapping, post call. So it will not map. So it will throw method not allowed. Okay, so that you have to understand. So 406 not acceptable means server didn't find any content that conforms to the criteria given for the user agent. Okay, so there is an accept header. If you see in the header section in Postman, there is accept section will be there. So there you have to set the content. If you want to, if there is necessity to put the data over there. So if it is required, you have to put it. Otherwise, it will throw 406 not acceptable. Okay, so if server is looking for the data in the accept header, but you have not passed it, okay, then it will throw 406 not acceptable. Okay, so these are basically 4xx type client side error. Then comes these are other types like proxy authentication required, and request timeout may happen, conflict will be there. So request cannot be completed due to some conflict. Then 401 gone, requested resources no longer available at a server. Okay, length 411 length required. The server refuses to accept the request without a defined length. There is not proper defined length available. Then precondition failed. The client has indicated preconditions in the header which is not being served. Okay, and the server doesn't meet that. Then entity is too large. Request entity is larger than the limits defined by the server. Then this error will come. Then request URL you are putting is very long, which is not acceptable. So that also it will throw error. Then unsupported media type. The content type you are putting it in media. Okay, that is not supported by the server. Then in that scenario, unsupported media type will come. Then comes 5xx type server code. This is very important. It is being asked in the interview. If the server takes the responsibility, here server takes the responsibility for this error. Client is fine here. Client can send this type of request, but it is being there is some issue in the backend side. That means developer needs to resolve it or fix it at the database side or at the code side. So first comes 500 internal server error. That means server has encountered an unexpected condition which prevented it from fulfilling the request. So you have to look into the code and see like where exactly exception came, because of which the request was not served, and you need to resolve that issue. Maybe there is some issue with a constraint violation in the database side, or there might be some edge cases you didn't handle in the code side. So you need to see the code to understand the issue basically. Then 501 not implemented. So HTTP method you are passing from the request, client is passing from the request, is not supported by the server. So that's why it cannot get handled. In that scenario, 501 not implemented will be there. So some different type of method you are trying to call it from this client side, but it is not implemented in the backend side. So this error will come. Then 502 bad gateway. 502 bad gateway. Okay, the server got an invalid response while working as a gateway to get the response needed to handle the request. Okay, some invalid response, it is being fetched as a response, which the client doesn't want that. Client wants a different response. But while hitting the when the client hits that particular request, client is getting an invalid response. That means it's a bad gateway that we need to handle it from the code side. Then 503 service unavailable. Maybe the service is down at that point of time. That point of time, maybe microservice is not able to handle the request due to heavy load. In that scenario, 503 service unavailable might come. Then comes 504 gateway timeout. The server is acting as a gateway, okay, and cannot get the response in time. So there may be like, there is a specific set of time divided for all the requests available. So let's suppose the time required at max is 3 seconds, but there is some huge length of code or complex code written with lot of for loops and lot of threads available. Thread is there to perform the task. So in that scenario, what happens? It may take some more time to process the request. So if the request has not been processed in a given time period of 2 to 3 seconds, then it may cause gateway timeout. That means similar to time limit exceeded in HackerRank or LeetCode you have seen, right? Time limit exceeded. Similar to that, gateway timeout is there from the server side. Okay, so if we are not getting the response within that 2 to 3 seconds, within the prescribed time period, then we will get this 504 gateway timeout. So these are the types of errors which we need to understand: 1xx, 2xx, 3xx, 4xx, and 5xx. So I hope this you will get the understanding of it. So try to research on it from your side as well. Try to learn it, try to implement it in your code. Then you will get to see like how these all are implemented. Okay, when you will get to see in the actual response, when you have implemented the REST APIs, then you will get to know, yes, this is working this way. Try to implement it, the main ones, basically this 5001, 5xx service codes. So try to implement it in your code, okay? And then you will see 500 you might have seen in your code, I think, while using Postman. If you have made some projects, then you will get to see 404, 400, 500, 502, 504. These are very common, okay? So these are asked in the interview. So be prepared, okay? So you can take the screenshots, or if you want the PPT, then you can let me know in the comment box below. I will just send you there. Okay, so we'll see you in the next video, in the next set of concepts. Till then, it's Devjit Roy signing off. Bye bye. Please like, share, and subscribe my video so that I get a motivation to create these type of videos again and again. See you.